having Fleetwood Macs be the band still be alive and well, and a lot of those lessons in being able to do that, I came from my days with Peter Green.
All right, so next up is a style of whiskey that once upon a time was a dirty word, and it's called it's a blend of straights. This is barrel bourbon. They are this is kind of a new age, new style of whiskey that used to be a dirty word in American whiskey. Blend is not well liked in American whiskey because it usually means bad whiskey. But now you got people like this upstart distiller blender called Barrel who spells it. Look how he spells it with 2 L's. See that? He's trying to be clever. And so he spells it with 2 L's. And his whiskey's pretty damn good.
And is it reflective of really from whence it came? I mean, how loyal is it to the blend that was not popular and it was like an off the radar word?
Well, so blend wasn't a popular word because like the Canadian whiskey distillers, they were real big blenders. And then after Prohibition, they didn't have a lot of stocks to put out straight whiskey, which is basically, pure whiskey. And so people would add like grain neutral spirit or essentially, vodka in with with whiskey to get stuff out into the market. And they had, they basically got their asses handed to them in the marketplace by blends. And so American distillers after that was like, don't use the word blend in our facilities. So if they had if they had a job that was actually blending, they would call it mingling or marrying or something like that. So they found every word in the world to use other than blend to talk about blending. So it's kind of funny.
That's what's known as tiptoeing around the tulips.
Now I get this might be something that you snacked on in London. I get marzipan in this.
Okay. I agree. I wouldn't have thought of it because I'm not conversant, but you're entirely correct. Learning all the time here up in the hills in Maui. Start a marzipan factory.
Oh, you have
marzipan is one of my childhood. I loved marzipan. I would always wait for the moment when Mum would bake a Christmas cake, and then of course the marzipan would go over all the fruit base center and put that on, and then the icing sugar on top and the frosting and whatever it's called here. But the marzipan was it. I would wait for the crumbles to fall from the side of the kitchen table and munch as I'm watching the cake being baked.
Oh man, I kind of want that cake now. That's the dietitian probably wouldn't want me to have it, but that sounds good.
Well, and the cake back in the day would have brandy in it and all sorts of stuff loaded up, and that cake would, with the amount of sugar and whatever is in a good Christmas cake, would last a year later. You could actually eat it. It's like a fantastic wedding cake, and you go like, well, what's that in the little box? And it's completely not deteriorated at all because of the sugar content. It's like being whatever, when they were
Preserve.
going overseas, well, the Navy and sailing, they learned about what sugar would do. Would we preserve, either dry it or pour sugar on it, and it would be sitting there just resilient and surviving whatever was thrown at it, because it would stay without going bad. So there you go.
Mick Fleetwood's story of a marzipan cake. That's
waiting for the scraps.
So you are you leaning toward a favorite so far?
I am. I know there's one more to come. If we get there.
Yeah.
I would have to go the 25.
Okay.
That I think you finished the bottle off.
Yeah, I have just a wee bit left to sip on. So
dram left.
Yeah,
is that a permissible word in this world?
Absolutely. Yeah, dram is you would find that we use the term dram quite a
good,
especially in our writing. You know, we use the term dram a lot in our writing.
Dram.
In Scotland, you know, in the Scotch styles of whiskey, dram is used a lot more in the vernacular. Whereas in American style, you know, we write with the word dram in mind. So yeah, used quite a bit. So one of my heroes in music, Neil Finn, joined Fleetwood Mac, and that was so cool. How did that come about? How did you recruit Neil? In my opinion, probably the most underrated musician of
all in all, and now I know him and love him so much as a person, which is a huge part of my life. But I fell in love with a song that when he was with Crowded House, and Hey Now, Don't Dream It's Over, which is very apropos for the world we're living in right now. And it struck an emotive chord for me. And I would say every night on stage, pretty much what I'll try and relate now is that song pulled me through a moment that I needed to see and believe in something that was far greater than me and hopeful.
Yeah.
And that's my first memory. I had no idea who he was or the band, but the song. And ever since then, of course, I learned more about his music, loved his music, and then all those years later, I met him in London, disconnected, at actually a beautiful event that was put on at the Albert Hall, and I was just in the audience, and Neil was one of the people when Paul had lost Linda, his lovely then wife. There was a great show that was put on, and he was on that show, and I met him after the show, and I was wandering around in London at that point, a bit disconnected from the music world. I was exploring some ill-fated business venture or something, and I said in all candor, I said, "What are you doing? It'd be great to form a band." And at that, I think he was in between, not knowing what to do with some of his solo stuff. And it never happened. But over 20 years later, I met him in New Zealand when Fleetwood Mac was touring. And I went to an award show, and there he was backstage. And that was the beginning of the story that led to him now being part of Fleetwood Mac. And we both communed as people instantly. And that was nearly 20 years later. And then I said, "Well, if you ever want me to come and play," I think he maybe thought I was half joking. And then he phoned me up or texted me, I can't remember what, emailed me and said, "Were you serious? Would you like to come and, you know, I have a great studio down here, and I obviously live in New Zealand, in Auckland." And I said, "Well, absolutely." So I went down there for about 6 or 7 weeks and played on an album and had the greatest time, rented a funny old Victorian house there. And that really consummated our true friendship that, who's to say, when the changes happened in Fleetwood Mac, that was my inclination, and he was very receptive. Although he took a breath or two, it was like unreal. So that's a real story. That's an hour's worth of explanation about the magic of connecting through a song, then time passing, meeting, crossing in the night, never quite connecting, always intimating that you're going to maybe do something, and it actually happened in the end. So it's a fantastic story and a tribute, you're right, to an incredibly we were both me and John have seen a lot of changes in Fleetwood Mac, and the band itself, with Mike Campbell and Neil coming into the band, two incredibly talented people in their own world, in their own right. And they live and breathe that. They bring all of that as their own legacy into this rather strange band known as Fleetwood Mac. Neil is
it definitely a seamless transition, at least from where I'm sitting, because I found his contribution to the band just perfect. He's a perfect fit. He really was a perfect fit.
Yeah. Who's no, like all those years ago.
Yeah.
But it was implanted in my head, and it wasn't about Fleetwood Mac, but it was about him. And then, of course, with Mike, that came more from Stevie, who had worked so much with him and with Tom Petty, and that there were real connections that made the transition correct, believable, and it had to be that. And the alternative was to do nothing, which could have happened. We were very lucky that the chemistry was there. It just needed the switch triggering. It's fascinating stuff, really.
Yeah. You brought up Tom Petty. It was such a tragedy to lose him so young, and so
Yeah.
much.
Unbelievable, and a great loss. As it, loss is loss, and it's magnified when it can be private, and it's still huge. But there is a fact that the lovely thing about the loss is the music that's left, or a piece of art, or poetry, or writing. I know that you enjoy writing, and that's what the legacy becomes. If there's going to be loss, it is at least important that people can relate and take a journey and be reminded of a journey. I'll remember this, and I'm triggering. Where do I tend to sip on whiskey? And in truth, I do it in England.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing it in Hawaii, and it's an interesting.
With the webcam.
With a webcam that went in and out. And
listen, that technology. Everyone's streaming right now. Everyone's using these devices, and yeah,
good.
I mean, it's the one thing that's keeping us together. I mean, thank God for technology. Really,
have to. Yeah, that would be worth drinking to.
So our next one is a 15-year-old. Now, I will warn you, this is 129 proof, but for me, it's very elegant at 129 proof. It's called George T. Stagg. This is the 2017. That year was one of my favorite whiskeys. So it is, it's a good drinker.
Wow. Interesting.
You got a little competition going on now.
Yeah, that actually is. And you definitely know what it is in terms of the content.
Yeah.
What was the content in it?
It's 129 proof.
Jeez Louise.
So the thing is like sometimes like when something comes in like that, it's that hot, it's that high in proof. Sometimes they actually don't feel like that. They tend to come off as spicy, like a pepper or cinnamon, versus the alcohol burn. Whereas something that would be lower in proof, like 80 proof, it could be it will feel just like it's gosh, it'll feel like turpentines, like burning, or like putting a 9-volt battery on your palate. So proof is never an indication of whether or not something is smooth and good. So you can't always like follow the proof.
I was actually asking the end result of what actually physiologically it has to have some reference point, correct? I mean, more of that or the same amount of, and then you go to this.
Oh yeah.
This brand here. It would be more effectual in.
From that perspective, yeah, it'll get you there quicker.
But you have to be very respectful of this particular item.
Yes. Yeah.
No, I had sort of an obvious question, but I thought maybe you were going to say, no, actually, it doesn't.
Oh, no, it'll, the great Booker, no, he was this iconic distiller. He would tell people, like he put out a product called, that was 125 proof, 130 proof. He'd say, he would tell people it'll put you on your ass. Don't drink too much of it. So.
Well, that gets down to the whole thing we mentioned earlier on, when when I was young, I drank beer. That was really all we drank, really, all we could afford, probably. And then shots of spirit, shots of whiskey, and so forth. But we were irreverent to what we were doing. We were after the effect, which is not what this is about.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy about wine. Are there the one or two moments where you go, rein yourself in? But it's about all of, hey, we've had a lovely afternoon talking on camera, off camera, about life, etc. And it's brought a unity to certainly, we haven't met, but we have now.
Yeah, that's right.
This is our moment that we all love about sharing food and drink and ambiance and company. So I'm very grateful that this all worked out. And I was reminded of the respect you have and should have for how this is, the care that's taken, and you're sitting here not like a school teacher, but it's been really interesting knowing, I'm hopefully not talking too much because I tend to do that, but
Oh, I love this.
listen to someone who really enjoys the nuances of something like music, that when you're in the presence of someone that knows and loves what they do. I can tell that you are that person.
Well, I appreciate that, Mick. I like also like combining music and whiskey. I have found that when I am listening to music, I'll want different types of whiskeys. So like what you hear can actually influence what you want to taste and what you will taste.
Well, there you go.
There's been a lot of studies that kind of like back that up too. But to me, every whiskey does go really, really well with a song. So what do you have is there a Fleetwood Mac song in this flight somewhere that, reminds you of a tune?
Well, uh, I was trying to describe, it's always not weird, but when you start sort of trying to be objective about who you are and what drives you, and I went immediately to feel, and I sort of, as a person, I think maybe has been too much sometimes, but I will not be in a place where I don't feel. Uh, I'm frightened of not having something to feel about.
Mm.
I said, when I'm frightened, I would, that would be my worst nightmare, never to really feel emotionally driven about something. So I sometimes overly go into areas to make sure that I do have that, and that as a song and as a testament to maybe not answering the question properly, but I'd be hard pushed not to pick a song of Peter Green's, because it's so about where I came from and what I identified with, which would be a song called Love That Burns, a beautiful slow blues that is indicative of a journey that Peter took that affected me a great deal. And I will enjoy putting that song on. And I think there were two little candidates here. I'm still with our friend here, 25-year-old Bourbon.
Well, let's do this. Let me help you make the decision. I'll tell you how I do it.
Okay.
And so when I am tasting analytically, when I'm really dialed in and I'm having to pick my favorite, which is often what I do is like I grade the nose, I grade the palate, and I grade the finish. And so the nose, this is like what I love about you. And, we spent a lot of time talking about your nose, and probably the first interview you've done, which maybe not, but where the interviewer was more curious about your nose than a lot of other things. But
I love that.
so you have a nose that can pick up aromas that most people can't. And so pay attention to that. Pay
Okay.
attention to that. And look for the things on the nose and see if you taste them. And if you don't taste those, that's okay. That's fine. But then when it's on the palate, look at the various points on the tongue that you're feeling tingling. If you're feeling it more on the front or the back or in the middle or down the sides, the very best whiskeys will kind of like drip down your jawline and cover it like butter and tickle the roof of your palate. And so look for how it's feeling on the tongue and how many different points that it's touching, and then what flavors you're picking up. And then as you swallow, after it's kind of down the hatch, if you will, how long is it on the palate? And that is your finish. And the longer it's on your palate, the longer the finish. Now, I grade a lot on that finish. I like to taste the whiskey after I've swallowed it for a good minute. So take all of that into consideration and pick your favorite.
A real lesson. This is when you think of that song, Silence is Golden.
Right. I live silence. I love silence.
Silence is good, right? Yeah. I'm actually going to change my mind. which I didn't think I was going to do. I'm going to be respectful of the choice that I actually end up liking this last one.
Okay.
That one has a lot of respect for. I'm enjoying that.
Well, sir, you picked George T. Stagg, and
It's beautiful.
I'd say I'd send you some more, but I think I'm all out. I'll see if I can, grab another bottle for you.
Yeah. What a fantastic afternoon. So I shall be, with what's left, loading this up off camera, and it'll be nice and safe in here. The last time I filled this up was in Malmesbury in England. There's a beautiful, it's beautiful around there, and stayed in a gorgeous hotel, and enjoyed a flask and walking in the hills. It's now empty from those days, so it will find a new marriage.
I love it. I love it.
There you go. I will treasure it.
The whiskey lives on, and we'll have future moments with you. Well, my friend, I toast you. I appreciate all you've done for music, and I'm looking forward to the next steps, whatever those may be, whether it's in virtual world or back touring again.
Yeah, and everyone out there, and take care of yourselves, and we will all get through this.
Yeah.
Amen.
Cheers, my friend.
God bless you.